Speaking of excellence, our community is fortunate, as I mentioned, to have an excellent school system. In fact, our school was recently recognized, as I mentioned, and I think Dr. Kent's going to talk about that. But most people, and I hope all of you, recognize the importance of having good schools in a community. It helps our community in many ways. We could not, in my opinion, achieve excellence without excellent schools. Unfortunately, schools in the state of Colorado and elsewhere around the country are very challenged. They're challenged to do more on a lower, less budget. And it wouldn't be so bad if that was a new trend, but it's been going on for a while, so long now that it's the new standard. And here to talk about that tonight is Dr. Ken Haptonstall. Ken, thank you.
Okay, this worked for you, so I'm going to see if it works for me. My eyes look a little watery, those great outdoors out there. I have some allergies that are I'm really not crying because of Kenny Rogers, I promise. There's some handouts coming out that will basically walk you through exactly what I'm going to talk about. But I guess first I just wanted to express my thanks for Keith for inviting me tonight. Last time we had a meeting about curriculum, none of you showed up. So I guess I'll have to come here and talk about curriculum. No. So. The title of what I'm going to talk about tonight is Where Are We With Your Schools? And I mean that. And I mean that in a literal sense, because these schools are your schools. They're part of this community, and they're really a function of what happens around here. And I think it's very important that you know where we are and what we're trying to do with the school system. So we're going to talk about that tonight, but I want to kind of back up and talk about a little bit of the journey we've been on this year. And I'm going to talk about budgets, but as we started going through the year, one of the things that we talked about was really reaching out to our community and seeing how we can work together to solve a lot of issues. I think Keith set this up pretty well, because the key thing is really around communication. And I expressed this to a large group of folks in December that we invited to a meeting to just talk about our schools, that I really believe that the communication in this community is difficult just because there's not a lot of ways to do it. But we have fallen down, and I have fallen down as a superintendent, and let you know how we're doing. So in an effort to change that, we've been trying to work really hard on that. So we met in December with about 100 folks to just talk about where we are, what we're doing, and how we can move forward as a system. Out of that meeting, I was really hoping to get 10 or 15 people to be on a steering committee to help us look at our system inside out, go to schools, check out what we're doing, really see what we're doing, and figure out ways to not only improve our school system, but work with our local, state, and federal folks on how we can improve our budget. There's some of you, and maybe you don't have to stand up, just raise your hand if you're on the steering committee. Look around the room. So, yeah, well, okay, school people, yeah, you're all on a committee. And we have a lot of community folks, because I think it's very important that we get your perspective on what we're trying to do. So I'm going to walk through this, but at any time, if you have a question, just like in school, raise your hand and I'll say, okay. We're going to start with just some goals that we have for our school system. Obviously, the number one thing for us is increasing student achievement, and that's always a goal. I'm hoping it was a goal when you were in school. It still is a goal. That never changes. Increase the rigor. So we are trying to challenge kids more. You may hear some rumblings coming out of the high school. We've changed some things at our high school. We're using what is called AP for All. Some of you might be familiar with advanced placement. It's a very difficult curriculum. Well, we have decided as a system that we are going to insist all of our kids, not just a few, but all of our kids strive to reach that curriculum. And what that means is not necessarily are they all going to college, but when they walk out our doors, they are prepared to go do something in the workforce. Because when you hear those stories about kids, they walk out of school and can't read or write, I hate to tell you, but that's true. That happens. But it's not going to happen here, because we are really challenging kids. I will tell you, for the first time in a very long time, when you talk to high school kids around our community, they will tell you that they don't get a lot of sleep but it's because they're working really hard, and they're working on things that kids normally have never had to. So that's been really exciting, and that's trickling down. It's really forcing our middle school and our elementaries to start picking up the pace so our kids are ready for those upper grades. So the rigor is increasing. We need to increase the positive relationships between student and staff at all levels. You probably remember your favorite teacher. You probably remember your least favorite teacher. That favorite teacher built a relationship with you. Whether it was talking about something that you had in common, or a sport, and they were a coach, or just a different way they made a contact with you. Some of the ways you'll notice we're doing that in our elementaries is we're doing multi-grade. I'm not going to say anybody went to a one-room schoolhouse here. I will not say that. But I will tell you it's a lot of the same concept. Because we have folks, we have kids that when they start making relationships with teachers, and they're in classes for 2 years, and we have multi-age classrooms, those kids perform much better. And so we've started doing that. Now that kind of flies in the face of what the state's telling us to do, because they expect us to keep every kid in every grade and test them in every grade. And you're going to hear a lot on the news about testing if you haven't already. And to be real honest, I don't think that's really the best thing for our kids. We really need kids to make good relationships with adults and progress through school and graduate and go into college and do what they want to do and be prepared. So we're working on some of those relationships. We need to remain financially stable. I will tell you that, the concept of living within your means, we do that. We do that very well. Unfortunately, if you've already scanned through the pages, you already know that living within your means cutting a lot of things when you don't have means. So we have lost almost 400 kids in 5 years. And when you think about that, and at $6,000 to $7,000 a kid, depending on what the state decides to fund us at this year, that's a tremendous amount of money. And it has impacted us greatly. And, it's easy enough to say that, yeah, when you lose kids, you lose teachers. You do. That's very fair. But if you haven't noticed, we still have the same amount of facilities. We still have the same amount of grounds. We still have all those buses we got to get kids back and forth on, but we've been forced to cut those down. Now, I'm not whining. I'm telling you that we're good with living within our means. That really isn't an issue. We'll make it work. But when we get to the budget, I'm going to show you how our means really are what they should be. Create a safe and respectful learning environment. Sure, if you've watched any TV ever, you read about bullying and the way schools aren't working, and and even yesterday, stabbing at a school. So there are things out there that, people, they do some pretty crazy things. But I will tell you, in our district, we've made a concerted effort to work with kids to build relationships with each other so they like each other, so they get along, so they aren't fighting. So we don't have a lot of those same issues. I could probably have Mr. Sorensen come up here and tell you we've decreased our discipline at the middle school 70% in 3 years. 70%, not 70, just from some of the things we're doing. So I think that's been pretty effective. And that last one on there is probably one of the more critical. And I think it's critical for you, it's critical for us. And that is establish a school system that draws families towards our community. Another thing you're probably not aware of, we have a transiency rate in our school system of right around 40%, 40 to 50. So if we have 200 kids in the middle school at the beginning of the year, we end up with about 200 kids, but 100 of them are different kids. You know how hard it is to teach kids throughout the year that come and go all the time? It's very difficult. And it impacts our schools in different ways, because if you had the same kids every year, year in and year out, you can do some really good things. We get them for a very short period of time. And we're expected to teach them just like the districts that have them for 5 or 10 years. Now, we do have a core group of kids, and you're a lot of the families that represent those kids. Some of those kids have come all the way through our system and are going through our high school. That's great. We have them for 12 years. We have proven that we do a great job educating those kiddos. So that really does some things. The other thing I really want to make happen is our schools are so good that when somebody's thinking about moving out of here, they think, well, I don't know, our school system's pretty good. I want to keep our kids in this place. So we're really trying hard to make them understand that we can be a benefit for their children. Now, with AP for All and the work we're doing in our elementary and middle school, we're doing things that very few other schools in the state are doing. Between that, and I don't know if you've ever heard of the Clow Scholarship, but the Clow Scholarship, if you get a kid who graduates from Grand Valley High School, they can go to any college in the nation, and all the parents have to do is prove what they can pay, and the Clow Scholarship picks up the rest of the tab. there's no reason people shouldn't be coming to our school system. So part of this is around communication. Most of you didn't know just what I told you, and that's the first slide. Because it's very difficult to get that information out, but we as a school system need to get more information out to you as a community so you understand the work we're doing and how it's going to help both us and our community. So I'm going to go through these. I am not going to read all those really tiny numbers because I discovered the other day, as my 9-year-old told me, I'm going blind and I didn't bring any glasses to see those really tiny numbers. So some outcomes, some things that are happening in our district because of the work we're doing. Assessment scores. Our assessment scores are coming up. They really are. We're seeing some struggles at the lower grades, but those transiency rates are in the 60%. So we're really trying to figure out ways that we can bring kids in and get them to speed fast. And we're still working on that. Keith mentioned we won the Grand Valley High School won the Governor's Award for growth. We were the top performing high school in the entire state for growth. Our kids went from point A to point B faster and at a higher level than anybody else for high school. So yeah. And that speaks kudos to the staff we have in this system. They work really hard and they're putting in a lot of time to make sure these kids can get where they need to go, and I'm really proud of them. Expeditionary learning, AP for all are two concepts we're working on. And then again, we've stayed financially responsible. So now I'm going to kind of get into the budget so you can see some things we have had to do over the last few years to really make some things happen. Now I'm going to explain why. Because we talked about the loss of student numbers. That's impacted us greatly. But there's actually a bigger skeleton in this closet that I need to talk to you about. So if you just look fiscal year 2011, fiscal year 2012, everything with a red number next to it is something we cut. And most of those are people. And I can tell you, I have been transmitting this information to our state legislature a lot because they don't understand what we've had to cut and how we're doing business. So we keep communicating this. But everything in the black typically are things that we have had to add because of state laws. So we have cut because we don't have funding, but we keep adding things because somebody tells us we have to. So if that sounds like fun to you, you can come to a budget meeting next week. So you can see 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. It's fairly depressing. It's depressing from my point of view because every year I get to sit down with the principals who really love meeting with me at this time of the year when we start talking about what else we're going to have to cut. Now I will tell you as a system, we have cut almost everything we can. And we're down to very little besides just a few pockets of people. There's just not much left. But if you look at page 5, and you look at the bottom of those two slides, there's this little thing that people aren't aware of that I think has really been, raising some eyebrows. So the way the state figures funding is obviously by the kids you have. And they go through these gyrations, and the formula is very simplistic here. But for example, in 2011, so fiscal year 2011, our district was supposed to receive, if you look just above that dark black line, $8,875,144. Well, a governor at that point and a lawyer, which are two bad people to get in the same room, made a decision that instead of doing the normal calculations, they were going to put a negative number in front of the calculations. They included what's called a negative factor into the budget. And every year for the last 4 years, what they have done is they've taken the budget we're supposed to get and applied a negative number. It started at about 8 or 9%, and it's currently right around 14, 15%. Now you think about that. If we're supposed to get $8.8 million, and we get 7.9, we had to cut $919,000 that year just because the state took it away. So that's not living within your means. That's your means and then, pull the carpet up. Well, over the course of the last 4 years, if you go from left to right on that, you'll see the next year we had to cut 1.1, the next year 1.4, the last year 1.3. So in 4 years, we've taken over $4 million out of our budget. Yeah, it's impactful. It is really impactful. And it's not, in a lot of ways, it's criminal, I think. And in fact, there are school systems around the state that are currently looking at suing the state, but I don't know what they're going to sue for. They're not going to get money back. But it has impacted us to a very great degree. So if you think about all those cuts that we've made, a little bit over 20% of those cuts, it's actually like 28% of those cuts have been because of loss of student kid numbers, which we're good with. I think that's fair. I have no issue with that. 70% of our cuts have been because of the state cuts to our school system. Now, we aren't in this alone. It's not just us. That's 178 school systems in the state. So, where are we? Why isn't this changing? I will tell you right now, the current revenues for the state are above, or they're the same or exceed what they did before this all started. But what the state has been doing is putting this money in a reserve fund. They're up to just over a little bit over $1.4 billion. So when we go and say, hey, it'd be a good idea to take that negative number and do away with it and make it a positive number, they say, yeah, we might give you some of that back, but we're going to attach a bunch of strings to it. Well, that sounds shocking to any of you, that the government would do that. And a lot of those strings aren't things that help us, honestly. They don't let me hire back the teachers we need. They don't let me give these folks raises who haven't had them in 5 years. You know, you want to keep good teachers. We spend a lot of money on training good teachers. So we have to be able to change that. And the state isn't doing it. In fact, just recently, like 3 weeks ago, they estimated the revenues were over what they thought they were going to be by $127 million. And so a bunch of people said, great, you can help out K-12 funding. Nope, you're going to send it to higher ed. You're going to send it to college. Well, there's nobody in K-12 education that's going to get in a fight with colleges. We have a pretty good relationship with those folks. We're not going to jeopardize that. But if we can't get kids through school systems because we're not being able to fund the things we need to fund, they're never going to college. So those are some of the issues. So, you know, and I could, didn't we have a budget question right now? I mean, I can answer it, but I think I've pretty well covered the horrific side of this. So here's some of the other things I think you need to know. So during this time, our wonderful state legislature has done a few other things to us. So if you look on the top of page 7, these are state mandates that have been happening at the very same time that we've been making these cuts. The first one is a new accountability system. We're good with being accountable, not an issue. But this accountability system requires more manpower just to do the paperwork to keep up with the accountability system. It also puts a lot of stress on teachers and adds more tests to what we do. And the tests were the first part. What they didn't mention was they were going to put a new evaluation system in 2 years ago where all the teachers are going to be rated on every test. Well, I can tell you, we have this little dilemma in schools. Kids take tests seriously when they matter. Well, the only tests that really matter to kids right now are the ones that get them into college. So you're hanging a teacher on a test that a kid doesn't really feel responsible for. Now, there are tests out there that help us understand where kids are, and we can change instruction. Good deals. But there are a lot of things going on right now that are not helping us as an education system. So we have new standards in assessment. You're probably hearing the word Common Core coming out. Yeah, that's a fun one. So, real quick history lesson. State developed their own standards 5 years ago. Did a pretty good job of doing it. All of a sudden, the federal government said, if you incorporate these other standards called Common Core, that aren't federal standards, that's a misnomer, they're actually developed by the Governors Association, but they are a national standard, so they work from state to state. The federal government said, if you incorporate those into your standards, you will qualify for Race to the Top money of over $100 million. And of course, our state board said, that's great, let's do it. We did it, they didn't give us the money. We tried it again, they didn't give us the money. So here we are sitting with 85% of our standards are Common Core. But there's only 2, and here's the kind of the funny thing, there's only 2 subjects that are actually Common Core standards, and those are math and language arts. So when you hear all this, it isn't everything, it's 2 subjects, but it is impacting some things. And you have a lot of people out there that are saying, repeal the Common Core, change all the testing. That's whatever. Just send us our money and let us teach our kids. I mean, you can do whatever you want to with that, but we have a lot of people working really hard on this. Sir?
What percentage of your budget does the local school district?
It's right now we're about 70% state, 30% local. We have the 3rd lowest mill levy in the entire state. And a lot of that has to do exactly what Keith talked about with property taxes.
Well, I know, but that everybody was excited and when it went over to the state.
Right.
The state's undependable as hell.
Undependable, and when they're sending you 70% of the money, they feel really like they ought to be telling you what to do. Because Colorado's a local control state. You could ask Mr. Shore, who's one of our board members, how local control he feels. Because everything we have on our books are state laws. Really, so you're exactly right. Yeah, people thought that was a great idea, right? Until somebody said, but you can't do what you want to do. Yeah. So a few other things. We have a new evaluation system. Food service regulations, that may sound kind of funny, but every time you look around, there's this new kids need to eat healthier, not drink pop, do that. You know, they need to exercise X amount during the day. Well, guess who gets charged with doing all that? We do. Jody Williams, who's our food service manager, gets a new set of regulations every year that we have to abide by. It's phenomenal. So, what money did they give us to do all this? Nothing. Nada. This is what's really called an unfunded mandate. In fact, for every one of those laws, the way they propose to fund those is through gifts, grants, and donations. I'm guessing none of you donated to the state to do any of these. Nobody else did either, so you're not allowed. So, current funding and local control, back to your question. The governor's budget this year proposed to actually make no change to the negative factor at all, so leave it at almost 15%, with adding in a little bit of money for cost of living and inflation. And that's what they were supposed to do in the first place without the negative factor. The reserves, actually when I printed this, when I worked on this in December, were 1.4 billion. They're probably hovering closer to 1.6 billion right now. 70-30 on the ratios, ideal according to the state is 60-40. And the big question is, how does local control work? Because honestly, when they're sending us all the money, they're telling us how to do things. So that's very difficult. So, you know, we are at a crossroads. We need the help of this community. We need to think of a way to solve this issue locally, because I do not believe this is going to happen at the state level. I just don't see it. And as we work through this, we think about a lot of things around our school system that are assets for you. First of all, buildings. We have beautiful buildings, but you know when you don't do a lot with the building for 30 years, you have to bring it up to speed. So we have to be able to fix our buildings. We have to keep good teachers. We have to keep these things we're doing to win the Governor's Excellence Award. But without a change in funding, we can't make that happen. So we've been working with this committee. We're working on 5 different things, everything from recruiting kids from everywhere we can, find people, to working with our state legislature, to regional and local, to we're going to go out and talk to you guys about what else we can do. So you're going to hear more from us and our steering committee just around ideas you may have. It has to be a community conversation. This can't be a school conversation anymore. And it really has to be us joining with you. I know, you know, we've been trying to get to things and talk to folks and see how we can help out and work in our community, because we need to be as much a part of you as you do of us. So we're going to continue to work hard, and I would like to say my door is always open. My email is always open, I know that. I get a couple thousand of those a day. So if you want to come talk to me, please feel free to. If you want to send me an email, give me a call. Anything you want to do to come talk to us about what we can do to be better and how we can solve some of these issues, I would greatly appreciate it. We do all enjoy working here. We have a great, great staff. Yes, sir.
Just out of curiosity.
Yep.
If the local school district would give you more, would the state then give you more?
Yes. Well, yes and no. So if we do a mill levy override, they don't reduce their funding. But if just the mills change because of the assessment on the assessed valuation for around here, then they do. They offset. The mill levy is the only way we can go above what the state and local shares are. So, good question. Yeah. Any other questions for me? Really? I usually get 4 or 5 or something. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. Yes, ma'am.
Most of us are retired.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was a double teacher also.
Yeah.
And I went maybe to Garfield school so that I really earned my way to heaven.
Yes, ma'am, you did.
Because I was in the state.
Yes.
But like we have our grandkids too, and we're thinking about them. And
Right.
where they are and what they're doing and everything. And I know that a lot of us, I mean,
Yes.
And I see you in that. And I really think this website, because
Right.
I used to spend a fortune on my own page, very low. Because I could taste in my own classroom. I walked into my classroom, many times there was nothing there. And I had to buy things.
Right.
Out of my own money. So
Right.
I understand.
Yes, ma'am. Yep, thank you. And I will tell you, mill levies, taxes, they're all tough questions. The one advantage we have here, one, we do have extremely low tax rate with our assessed valuation. But the other thing we have is a gas and oil industry that supports this area. And any mill levy we pass, approximately 92% of all the funding comes out of those revenues. So we were figuring the other day, if we can boost our general fund enough, and we can't even boost it enough to make these numbers up. But if we can boost it up, we're talking less than $20 a year for a $100,000 home to really take care of our issues. So is it money? It absolutely is. It is. I'd never argue against that. But I think the investment is so critical for what we have going on here, the future of this community, that, I hope people are willing to think about that. So any other questions for me? All right, so I need to turn this back over to Keith. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Ken, and just for the record, I know there is at least one person in the room that went to a one-room schoolhouse for 5 days. Thank you, I appreciate your comments, and it's good to know that you're on top of it, you're trying to figure out ways to deal with it, but it sounds like it is certainly a challenge.